Hey guys, Wyatt Claypool here. In a piece of news that is both surprising and completely unsurprising, Prime Minister Mark Carney's first budget has been attacked by a Liberal MP. That Liberal MP is Nate Erskine-Smith, who, if you have a bit of background on, you will know that he has a deep hatred for Mark Carney. He was one of these Liberal MPs who announced at one point last year that he wasn't going to run for re-election. He could see the writing on the wall. Everyone hated Justin Trudeau. And so he was probably going to duck out of federal politics and maybe pursue Ontario provincial politics. But then Carney became the prime minister, and he promised Nate Erskine-Smith that if he ran for the Liberals again, he could be the housing minister. And technically, Carney did make good on that because he made Erskine-Smith the housing minister for 3 weeks. He was the housing minister of effectively Carney's rump parliament before the federal election. And after the federal election, not only was Nate Erskine-Smith not the housing minister, he was no minister. And the biggest insult of all, he was replaced by Gregor Robertson, the former mayor of Vancouver, who should be nowhere near housing. So Carney found it preferable to make the guy who touches things and they set on fire the housing minister instead of Erskine-Smith. And it's probably because although Carney himself is pretty left wing, I think he's not really that kind of hyper progressive leftist like Erskine-Smith is. Yes, Carney is very progressive, but in terms of his temperament and attitude and his need for everyone to wear ties at work, he doesn't really seem to get along with Nate. And Nate, since he was basically pushed into the backbench, has a deep hatred for Carney and has been chirping at him from there for quite a while. You will remember at the flight attendant strike from Air Canada, Erskine-Smith was one of the Liberals who came out to basically say that the government was completely messing up worker relations and that we should have been trying to actually, work with these people, negotiate, and you don't throw people under the bus. He was pretty vocal. And now he is back to be vocal once again and talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly inside of Carney's budget. And what's funny is when you look at the runtime of this video, and we will be getting to it in a second, the video is 4 minutes and 10 seconds. And he talks about good stuff for about maybe the first minute and 10 seconds, if you even include the lead up. If you just remove the neutral lead up, he maybe gives the budget compliments for approximately 20 seconds and then starts talking about things he finds bad and ugly. But we will be getting into that in just a second here. But before we do, I just want to remind you guys, if you like the video, please scroll down and hit the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you are not yet a subscriber. Try and help me get to 100,000 subscribers. And of course, leave a comment on what you think about the situation in the comment section below. But let's get to Nate Erskine-Smith, who, in a certain sense, if I ever became an MP, I'd kind of be a little bit like Nate because I would just continue hosting a podcast, whether I was in office or not in office. Nate hosts this podcast he puts on himself called Uncommons, and he's, pretty outspoken. The thing is that I don't really attribute why he made this video to being a guy who just likes open discourse and likes honesty, as much as Nate Erskine-Smith likes to cast himself as, the everyman who always speaks truth to power and speaks his mind. It's very selective. I find him to be a very cynical figure in reality, and I think what he's trying to do is take jabs at Mark Carney to prove his progressive bona fides before he potentially resigns his seat, because that's a rumor that's going around too. People like himself and Chrystia Freeland might end up leaving Parliament in the next year here. And I think he might try and go and take Bonnie Crombie's old job as the Ontario Liberal Party leader, which is actually something he fought her over the first time. He came decently close to winning, but fell short and just kept his job in federal politics. But it looks like he may now jump over to the Ontario Liberal Party again, now that it looks like the coast is clear to do that. And now on his way out, he's slagging Prime Minister Carney.
From that. But here's a rundown of what I see as the good, the bad, and the ugly from Budget 2025. Let's start with the good. In the face of threats, the government is rightly prioritizing actions to secure our sovereignty. That includes support for businesses and workers affected by tariffs, a Buy Canada procurement policy, significant new infrastructure spending, and a huge commitment to the Canadian forces. There are also smart, forward-looking ideas, like the Sovereign Fund for Critical Minerals, taking a lesson from Norway. And there are new dollars for innovation and to attract talent and research from the U.S., whose administration seems intent to run intelligence out of its country.
I don't know what he means by that. Like, but a lot of the things he's praising is just program spending effectively. We're going to spend a lot of money trying to create shovel-ready jobs and whatnot, a lot of infrastructure. There's some green energy spending in there and whatnot. But we're pretty much at the end of his praise. And I basically had to run us up to the first 10 seconds because before in the first 10 seconds, he's just introducing himself and saying nothing particular. Within 35 seconds, he's pretty much done basically saying anything good about his own party's budget.
There are also useful actions to respond to rising youth unemployment, to support PSWs, to protect the Canada Disability Benefit from taxation, and more. There's lots to like in many ways, and more generally, I welcome the focus on productivity, both to drive economic growth in the private sector and to get the most out of public services, although yes, care is required to ensure those efforts don't go sideways. Now to the bad, or more fairly, where expectations were set at a level that we failed to meet, including on the question of generational investments.
You can already see that this is going to be used for a conservative attack ad, and Erskine-Smith knows this. Again, this man does not like Carney, and I think he is willing to throw some barbs out there that are going to hurt him, because I think that he sees his future in Ontario Liberal politics provincially, and so I think he actually would like to see Mark Carney go down to flaming defeat because he was unwilling to listen to the expert of everything that is Nate Erskine-Smith.
First, stalled climate action. I don't want to be too dismissive here, as the Canadian Climate Institute rightly highlighted the importance of a strengthened industrial carbon price. But apart from that promise, there was nothing new. Yes, we are moving forward with strong methane rules and clean investment tax credits, and these are key pieces. But we are also cutting tree planting, moving away from an emissions cap.
We're cutting tree planting. The Liberals never planted a tree. They're just admitting that the tree planting program was stupid and scrapping it. But what you'll get here is that he is criticizing Carney from the Liberals' progressive left, because every party has a left flank and a right flank. Even the NDP, even the Greens have more conservative wings and more left-wing wings. Inside the Liberal Party, remember, to get into government, they relied on a lot of both NDP and conservative Liberal switch voters, people who had previously voted for one of those parties but were willing to cast a ballot for the Liberals. The budget seems perfectly calculated to tick off those two flanks of the party, because the people who maybe switched from voting conservative or were more conservative tempered voters who voted for the Liberals in the last election, they're going to be mad about just all of the spending in the budget, how it's just not a deviation from the way that Justin Trudeau did government budgets. It's just a lot of money being sprayed around the economy, hoping that it's going to like invest us into the future. We're just lighting money on fire and putting money into bloated national projects. It's not actually going to be good in the long run compared to just cutting taxes and letting people do what they want. So that's why that wing of voters is ticked off. And if you take like the 43% of Liberal voters, I would say that probably about 7% on the right flank are a little uneasy about the budget. Doesn't mean they're all going to vote conservative next time, but 7 out of those 43 voters are probably the types who were looking for way more fiscal responsibility. But Erskine-Smith probably represents the other 7, the other maybe even 10% on the left side of the Liberal Party who actually could go and vote NDP if they're not impressed with what's in the budget. And he's basically saying it's not progressive enough, and then he's going to go into how it's going to be cutting jobs and whatnot. And that's probably what the NDP is going to be running on in the next election. The idea that the Liberals were pursuing too much austerity, meaning that, they're cutting too much, operational spending, and too many public sector employees are being thrown under the bus. The funny thing is that the budget's extremely irresponsible in its spending, even with the cost-saving measures. But Carney, again, has made a fiscally irresponsible budget that also ticks off the public sector unions and the green progressives like Nate Erskine-Smith.
Winding down greener homes, and the budget offers no new money for climate action. On housing, we've got the beginnings of Build Canada Homes.
You can feel the seething contempt from Erskine-Smith on this issue because he should have been the guy in charge of housing.
A tax cut for new home buyers, and some dollars for housing-enabling infrastructure that are important but unfortunately very unlikely to move the needle on development charges to a degree we would like. It falls short of these specific promises in our platform, and it unfortunately falls well short of the wartime effort that many of us thought we'd deliver. Now, the fiscal frame of spend less to invest more is actually one that I like.
Like, apparently he likes having his cake and eating it too, which doesn't actually surprise me considering that Nate Erskine-Smith is very much a democratic socialist.
Operational books generally in balance, and a capital deficit spending more easily justified. But the budget adds $140 billion in new spending over 5 years, $90 billion net after savings, and only 36% of the net new spending is capital. Related, there is a lot of deficit financing here to cover non-capital new spending. Yes, honoring our initial 2% commitment to NATO made sense, and a middle-class tax cut was a platform promise. But these are far and away the two largest financial commitments.
This is where he's also showing how left-wing he is. The spending he is having the biggest problem with is defense spending and tax cuts. And the tax cuts aren't even really a tax cut. It's nothing. The fact that the tax cut only costs the government $27 billion, it should tell you something about how minor it was. In terms of the total deficit, $78 billion, a very small portion of it is going to paying to give people back their own money. But I'll let Nate keep it talking. But the funny thing about all this is he's criticizing the amount of spending too, which, let's be clear, if Nate Erskine-Smith was the housing minister, he would have probably blown even more money. But again, part of the goal of this video is no doubt just to slag Mark Carney on his way out of government, because no chance Nate Erskine-Smith runs again for this party.
They are non-capital, and they should be paid for. My kids shouldn't pay for today's military or for me to save $400 of income taxes. And much-needed OAS reform.
And even right there, he just admitted that the tax cut, on average, is only giving people $400 back. Because the Liberals did this stupid thing where they're like, oh, on a household level, if both people only make up to $50,000, you're saving up to like $800 or $750. They like really stretched how much money was going to be given back to people by creating this like scenario where we're talking about it from a household level. If both people are basically making the bare minimum to be able to qualify for it, they're not making more than $100,000 a year. They did their best to make it look like they're giving you a lot of money back. And Erskine-Smith basically says, yeah, we're giving you $400. So like nothing. I do like the honesty there.
The largest non-capital growing expenditure. It still isn't part of our political conversation. Now, the ugly. And there isn't a lot that falls in this category, thankfully. First, we see the budget commit to a new inefficient fossil fuel subsidy for LNG facilities. Look, if there's a business case for LNG, there is a business case. We do not need more public dollars chasing fossil fuels.
There's a business case. The problem is the government regulations on top of it. And Nate Erskine-Smith is one of these people who talks out both sides of his face. He keeps talking about, well, if the private sector wants it, then they can fund it themselves. But at the same time, he's cheering on raising industrial carbon taxes. He thinks that there's not enough climate action in the budget. He opposes the conservatives wanting to get rid of regulations that are stifling fossil fuel development. You can keep saying that, oh, I'm a believer in the free market. If the private sector wants it, we can have it, but I'm not putting any public dollars towards it. Well, yeah, he can say that, but he's being dishonest because he's the one making it so expensive the private sector won't do it. While at the same time, he's like, well, that's just how the free market works. Like, no, that's how killing a project from the governmental side works.
Worse, we see major cuts of over $2.5 billion over 4 years to international development assistance. Real Keir Starmer energy that unfortunately caters to a prevailing, albeit short-sighted current view among wealthy donor countries. A Pearsonian budget this is not. Now, I know
that's another tell of just how radically left-wing this guy is. He's upset that the amount of foreign aid spending is going down, that he actually attacked Keir Starmer, the Labour Prime Minister of the UK, basically casting him as too right-wing, because this guy is like a Jeremy Corbyn, Bernie Sanders type of a liberal.
These are not easy times, and a budget process involves tough choices. Of course it does. It's also only a first budget. It can't be expected to solve all problems. And the devil will be in the details of implementation in many cases, as it always is, from infrastructure and housing to innovation spending to the industrial carbon price to finding efficiencies in government in a manner that is fair and effective. Overall, the budget meets the moment in part, on questions of sovereignty and with a focus on spurring economic growth at home. And look, it's certainly not.
I'm just gonna leave it there. What does he mean by like, oh, it's gonna spur economic growth at home? We've been doing this for 9 previous Liberal budgets. What do you mean spurring growth at home? Every single budget that Justin Trudeau put out was just throwing a pile of money into a giant fan and hoping that it was just going to fly around the economy and it was going to just grow things. It's like the farming equivalent of someone just going back in medieval times and just grabbing a bunch of seeds out of a bag and just tossing it. Like, we do better these days without kind of hackneyed methods like that. Just let the private sector grow and just like grow on their own, just get out of their way. But Nate Erskine-Smith comes from the left-wing perspective that this budget, might not fix problems this time, but the right budget can fix problems. The right budget, there's no such thing as the budget that will fix problems. The budget that will fix problems has way less spending in it because a good budget knows that the budget's not going to solve the problems. People are going to solve their own problems, and you better just get out of their way. Get out of industry's way. Get out of the way of large and small businesses. Get out of the way of farmers. Let them do their own thing. But again, Erskine-Smith is a economic meddler who thinks that it's the government's job to pick winners and losers and to grow the economy from his idealized perspective of having, green energy be the thing that drives us into the future, and that we're going to do away with fossil fuels. We're going to basically unionize the entire labor force and stuff like that. He's kind of a nut. But I do find this very telling, again, about the budget, that this is something that he's being attacked over, that the Liberals are being attacked from their left flank of their own party. But now I want to get to the reaction that the CBC actually had to this. They did mention this on their panel just a couple of hours ago.
Kate, I see you nodding along. Is Nate Erskine-Smith united the New Democrat and the Conservative in a similar viewpoint on this? Is that what's happening here?
Yes, uniter in chief. No, I think that there's really two things at play. The first one is Nathaniel Erskine-Smith's own ambitions. And, he's been pretty clear that he's at least kicking the tires at perhaps another run at the Ontario Liberal Party. And they really are poised to make gains at the expense of the NDP. So it's not strange, I think, that he would be flexing some of his progressive bona fides as that party goes through a leadership review in a race.
By the way, I think I said bona fides earlier in this video, but I actually did not even listen to this clip beforehand. So just in case you think I'm a hack stealing other people's verbiage, I usually just screen these videos very lightly beforehand because I don't want to know exactly what's said, so I come off as robotic.
The Ontario provincial level. But the other piece of this, of course, is that Nathaniel Erskine-Smith is part of the team. He has a misalignment, I think, right now that a lot of progressives may be feeling in the party. We just talked about, do red Tories have a home in the Conservative Party? I think there might be a lot of progressive Liberals, I'll call them terracotta Liberals, people that might go orange and red. Where do they fit into the Carney government? And to the objectives that are being put forward there. So Nathaniel Erskine-Smith is not the only person that that may fall into that camp that's in caucus or even necessarily cabinet. And certainly, to Vandana's point, a lot of the younger people that support the Liberal Party. So I think that might be something that the Carney government may continue to grapple with. You see them trying to kind of have it both ways on environmental policy, for example, but we may see more Nathaniel Erskine-Smith in terms of discontent with moving away from some more of those progressive policy banners that were carried by the previous Trudeau administration.
Now, I'm not going to hold my breath and see if the media is going to start stirring up rumors about whether or not Mark Carney is vulnerable going towards some sort of a leadership review, because that's what they're doing to Pierre Poilievre after Chris D'Entremont ended up crossing the floor. Erskine-Smith, Chrystia Freeland, many other Liberals are actually likely within the next year to resign their seats, potentially at the same time that someone like Matt Genereux may end up resigning his seat in the spring in Edmonton Riverbend, because there are people who are sort of either part of the old Trudeau guard who Carney has completely sidelined out. Chrystia Freeland has gotten effectively an envoy job to Ukraine, so it doesn't even really make sense for her to stick around as an MP because her job very much puts her on foreign soil most of the time. And with someone like Erskine-Smith, he's just not only kind of part of the old Trudeau guard, but he's also just part of the new left who doesn't really have a place in Carney's government. It's not because Carney's somehow a big conservative. He's just not willing to move left at the speed that Erskine-Smith is. Carney just kind of understands political reality, that he can't be a wild-haired progressive right now and that he has to kind of move slowly. And Erskine-Smith's like, why don't we just have a big cavalry charge against the fossil fuel industry and kill them all? And part of this, again, is also just him trying to criticize Carney to make himself look better as a progressive running for the Ontario Liberal leadership. Although you then wonder, is Mark Carney then going to try and go after him and try and trip him up if he tries to leave the party and run for OLP, the Ontario Liberal Party leadership, as revenge? You don't criticize me when you're in my caucus, so I'm going to make sure that you definitely don't get to become the provincial Liberal leader so that you can keep prodding at me. But anyways, so that should be it for this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed me highlighting this specific little gripe that's happening with the budget inside the Liberal Party. Again, don't hold your breath for a bunch of legacy media coverage on if Carney has proper control over his caucus or not. They do it for the Conservatives, but obviously they're not going to do it for the Liberals. Like, share, and subscribe, everyone. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys all later.